everyone, welcome to Waterbear Reads and happy Jane Austen July! Today I'm going to be sharing with you all the books that I have been holding aside from my book haul videos throughout the last year to share with you in this video. I do it every year, and my very first one I themed after Pride and Prejudice, with Hugh Thompson's famous peacock being sort of the muse. And then last year I focused on Emma with her strawberries, with the strawberry scene. This year my theme is Sanditon, and the intro shot was filmed at Acadia National Park. I went there really early one morning before any of the tourists arrived and took some footage on a beautiful beach called Sand Beach. So I hope you enjoyed that. I have been reading through the Sanditons. Last year, I think in my video, I told you guys that I had been on the PBS Masterpiece Theater website, and they had put out about 6 books that were related to Sanditon. Well, I've been doing some research and I found 16. So I've been slowly reading through them, about one every month, since the beginning of this year. Oddly enough, this being the 250th anniversary of Jane Austen's birth, because I've been exploring Sanditon, I've just grown even more interested in learning about Jane Austen's final days and her letters. So I have a few books that I picked up about Jane Austen's letters as well as her life that I'm excited to share with you. I'm using my Jane Austen mug, so I'll take a sip and we'll get started. Before getting into the books, I wanted to show you some Jane Austen commemorative stamps that I discovered when I was researching Angela Barrett for my Snow White Illustrator Explorer earlier this year. I came across some postage stamps that were Jane Austen related that were done by Angela Barrett. So I purchased them off eBay. And then when I was looking around for her stamps, I also came across these from Barbara Brown, who was an illustrator from Surrey, England. By the way, I wanted to tell you that I'm filming in the morning because my son is home from school right now. And that's why I'm also speaking in a softer voice right now, so as to not wake him up. But anyway, so I'm going to start by showing you guys the new versions of Jane Austen's works. And the first one that I picked up is another new Cranford Collection, Persuasion. I love these. I've been collecting them. You can see I have a collection behind me. These are also sometimes referred to as the Timeless Classics collection, and they're so pretty with the gold embossing. The frontispiece and the drop cap is illustrated by Hugh Thompson. The drop cap and cover illustration are done by both him and Cristina Serrat. Cristina Serrat is an illustrator out of Barcelona, Spain, and she does so many beautiful books that I wish were in English. They're all in Spanish. Speaking of Hugh Thompson, I picked up 2 more editions from SeaWolf Press. I picked up Persuasion as well as Pride and Prejudice. I've shown you Northanger Abbey in a previous video that I've put out. This was my first one that I picked up. I really love the look of these. They're just soft cover and they're inexpensive, but they're still so handsome. They contain the artwork of historically significant versions. On this cover, they have one of Hugh Thompson's illustrations, colorized. Everything else stays pretty close to the original. Here's the famous drop cap first chapter heading illustration. Another thing I really love is there will be a wonderful chapter heading illustration, but also a drop cap will be illustrated, and they're all different. And they always tend to be a little humorous. I love this one. This is when Elizabeth is visiting Charlotte. In the drop cap here, you see a spider's web with a spider. I thought that was pretty neat. Another chapter heading illustration with the drop cap, and another one. But there are also illustrations throughout. So that is their version of Pride and Prejudice. Persuasion is a little different. This one is taken from the 1913 Macmillan edition, and it has the cover art of C.E. Brock, but the interior is Hugh Thompson. C.E. Brock, the Brock brothers, H.M. Brock and C.E. Brock, were the first people to illustrate Jane Austen's work in color. They kind of split the novels up between the 2 of them. Each one illustrated 3 of them. C.E. Brock did Persuasion. Let me show you some more of the Hugh Thompson illustrations. Hugh Thompson was the first illustrator to come along who really captured Jane Austen's sense of humor. And also he was the first illustrator to really put a large amount of illustrations in her works. Up to that point, illustrated editions were very sparingly done. Here's one final one But yeah, so that's Persuasion. And with the 3 of them, I'm just so happy. I plan to collect them all because I think they're so handsome. I do this thing on my Instagram account every month where I find a vintage, out-of-print children's book that's illustrated. And in April, I found a book called Return of the Twelves that was about the soldiers that belonged to the Bronte siblings. It was by Pauline Clark. And it was really interesting. I noticed the illustrator had the most remarkable illustrations, and when I was researching the illustrator, I came across her Pride and Prejudice, which was illustrated that same year, 1962. And this Pride and Prejudice is just wonderful. I really enjoy the illustrations, and I think it's just so cool looking. It's just such a unique style, and I thought it was really pretty. And I felt so lucky to find it. In the back of this book, there's a paragraph about the illustrator Bernarda Bryson, which I really appreciated, but even so, it was a little limited. So I looked her up, and she's from Ohio and lived for a time in Washington, D.C., but mainly settled in New Jersey. But what I really found interesting was that she lived to 101. She passed away in 2004, but what a wonderful long life, 101. I love this double page spread as well with, I guess, what would that be? The town of Lamberton, I suppose. I was so happy to have discovered this Pride and Prejudice, which I had not known anything about before. You never know where it's going to lead you when you start looking into illustrators. The final of Jane Austen's 6 major works that I picked up of illustrator value to me is this one illustrated by Emily Sutton. When I did my Blackwell's order earlier this year, I included this one, but I was holding it back to show you in this video. I've wanted to get this one for a while now because I love Emily Sutton's work. I have a couple of her classics already. This one, unfortunately, has no illustrations on the interior, but it's just such a pretty paperback softcover edition that I just wanted to get it and add it to my collection. I had actually read the Sanditon Continuation that was done by Jane Austen's niece, Anna Lefroy Austen, and I actually was rather impressed with it. It's not finished, it's also a fragment. It ends with Sydney Parker getting up and leaving quite suddenly. For those of you who don't know the story of Sanditon, Sydney Parker is sort of the love interest, or the presumed love interest, that we believe Jane Austen intended. Anyway, so he gets up and he leaves rather suddenly, but after that section, there's a whole other section that she wrote about the background of Clara Brereton. Clara Brereton, for those of you who don't know, was the poor relation, a young woman who had been orphaned, who had no real family and no money, who out of charity was taken in by the very great lady of the town of Sanditon. The great lady's name is Lady Denham. Anyway, so Anna Lefroy Austen, Jane Austen's niece, went into quite a bit of background about Clara Brereton, and I was so impressed. I found that she kind of shares that same ability to read society and the way that people act that Jane Austen did so well. So after reading Anna Lefroy Austen's continuation, I began to wonder how much of Sanditon was discussed between Jane Austen and her niece. And I started to look into it further, and I wanted to find letters. During the time when she was working on Sanditon, she was at Sutton Cottage, which is very nearby to where Anna Lefroy Austen was living with her husband and children. So I wonder how much conversation might have taken place. And I know that there wouldn't be any letters between the two of them, living so near, of course, but I thought perhaps there might be some reference to a conversation. So I found this one, My Dear Cassandra, Jane Austen, Letters to Her Sister, selected and introduced by Penelope Hughes Hallett. This book has a wonderful selection of Jane Austen's letters, not just to Cassandra, but just many of her letters in general. And it's divided into sections, into 6 sections actually, that takes her through her youth, into her time in Bath that she spent there, where she was actually rather unhappy, and also during the time when she lived in Sutton Cottage and was so productive, put out most of her works, and then also to her final days. And it's very well organized with pictures of the time period and portraits of the family wherever it was possible to find, and pictures as well of the houses in which they lived. And I've been really enjoying the selection of letters. It does not include all of her letters, it's just a selection, but I think it's a really great starting off point if you are interested in reading through the letters of Jane Austen. Let me show you some of the interior. This one is Sydney Gardens in Bath, as well as Jane Austen's silhouette on the frontispiece. Here as well is Jane Austen's and Cassandra's silhouettes. And then Cassandra Austen was also an artist, and she did this picture, this painting of Jane Austen, which I thought was beautiful. I love the colors that she used. Here is a picture of Tom Lefroy. He and Jane Austen had a bit of a romance between the two of them. I really enjoy these little pieces of history that you also find throughout this book. For example, this was mourning clothes that you would find on a sort of pamphlet advertisement of clothing. This was another painting by Cassandra Austen of Fanny Knight, their niece. And then this chapter at the end was especially interesting about Jane Austen's last days in regards to studying Sanditon. Jane Austen's Garden by Molly Williams with the illustrations of Jessica Roux. It is a beautiful version that is wonderfully organized. It's divided up into the different types of gardens that Jane Austen would have been familiar with during her lifetime, such as the parkland and the kitchen garden. And then it takes different species that you would find in those growing situations, presenting where in Jane Austen's books you would find them. All the information and perspective on the plants in this book were taken from Jane Austen's 6 main novels. Another thing that I found really cool was all the rose species that were created in lieu of Jane Austen and her life. Each section has a wonderful section heading illustration like this one. This is one of my favorites, the hedgerow, because of course it has heather in it. My namesake plant. How I love honeysuckle. That's a plant I really want to add to my garden still. And thistles, and here's the heather, which I loved. There's wonderful crafts in here as well, and things that you can make at home, like lavender water. It's just a gorgeous book to have on the shelves. So I'm so grateful to have received that one for my birthday. Jessica Roux is an illustrator out of Nashville, Tennessee, and another book that I'm interested in getting of hers has to do with the language of flowers. One of the things that was brought up in this book is how people in the Georgian and the Victorian times communicated their emotions that couldn't really be spoken through flowers or florals or plants. And so I'm very interested in getting it. The other book that I picked up when I went to Andre Strong Booksellers in Blue Hill, Maine, I just did a vlog of that trip in my previous video, was this Presenting Miss Jane Austen by May Lamberton Becker. And it's illustrated by Edward Price. And I know the cover isn't in the best shape, but I'm going to put some Mylar plastic on it. There is a newer edition out that I'll pop up. Oh, and that's May Lamberton Becker, by the way. But I just really loved this vintage version. Presenting Miss Jane Austen is a book about Jane Austen's life, but written for middle grade or young adult readers. And it's fully illustrated. And what I loved about it is that it really focuses in the beginning, especially on her parents as well, and Jane Austen when she was young, and her time in Steventon. Some of Edward Price's illustrations, and I cannot find very much about this illustrator, unfortunately, but the artwork in this edition is just wonderful. Perhaps the newer edition has a little bit of information about him. I'll have to see if I can find it and check it out. There's also these full-page illustrations. Oh, let me show you the end papers. Isn't that wonderful? Gorgeous. The next book I want to share with you is this gorgeous Jane Austen, an Illustrated Treasury by Rebecca Dixon. It's similar to Barbara Heller's versions, where there's quite a bit of ephemera placed inside envelopes that look like this, where you can open them up with a sticker, and it has so much information. The best way to describe it is a book that is about Jane Austen's life and Jane Austen's world, divided into sections where her works lead you into the discussions. So like, for example, the first one will be her juvenilia, and it'll talk about Jane Austen's world through the works of her juvenilia. And then the next one will be Sense and Sensibility, which was published first. And it will talk about Sense and Sensibility and what was going on in the world at the time and how it relates to the book. and where Jane Austen was in her life as well. And it also has so many interesting things about the world that they lived in that I didn't know. That, for example, children of the gentry were very often sent away for the first year of their life for nursing and for caring, including Jane Austen and her sisters and her siblings. They all went away for the first year. And it also asked the question whether that might have had an effect on the relationship that Jane Austen had with her mother, because they apparently had a very strained relationship from some things that I've read. It's just a remarkable book, and I highly recommend it. Let me show you some of the interior. Here is that section I told you about with Jane Austen's silhouette and her mother's silhouette, labeled mother-daughter tensions. Another thing that shows up so much in Jane Austen's novels are the rules of inheritance, how wealth is passed down, and usually passed down to a son. And there's a term for it called primogeniture. And it's just very interesting to read about, and they have it all written out in this one section here in the book. One thing that I especially found amazing about this that I had not known about before was that Cassandra Austen had actually illustrated Jane Austen's first work, or one of her early works, The History of England, that Jane Austen did when she was quite young. And I wanted to show you some of Cassandra Austen's illustrations, which I thought were lovely. There's another one. Isn't that just wonderful? I had not known that before until I found it in this book. Oh, and by the way, many illustrations by Hugh Thompson and C.E. Brock are included in this version. So this is one from Sense and Sensibility. One of the wonderful things too is that they have some of Hugh Thompson's illustrations colorized on these little pieces of paper. And this is when Elizabeth Bennet overhears Bingham and Darcy speaking about her when he says, "She's tolerable, I suppose." That scene, which I love. There's several of them, and several cards from various scenes from the Pride and Prejudice book. And I just think they're wonderful. And I had this idea that I could do a little Jane Austen area and put these in frames, which I think would be really neat. Here's an illustration by H.M. Brock from Pride and Prejudice, one of the first color illustrations ever produced. Here's that picture of Fanny Knight, their niece, done by Cassandra Austen. I've shown you this one before in this video, but this one is larger, and you can kind of see that Fanny is also drawing an illustration. I can't really make out what she's drawing, but I thought that was really cool. And then there's these two pictures of Jane Austen. This is a watercolor that Cassandra Austen did of her sister, and then there's another one that I showed you earlier as well that was done by Cassandra. I just think it's so wonderful how sometimes one sister is the writer and the other one is the artist. You get the same situation with Louisa May Alcott and May Alcott. Here's an illustration from Emma by Hugh Thompson. And I especially loved this section looking over Jane Austen's shoulder that talked about her writing of Persuasion and how she was unsatisfied with it, and she actually went into a little depression about it and then rewrote it again. And so I guess it was just part of the process, you know, getting really low about it and then doing better. So I thought that was really cool. But yeah, just a wonderful book with so many things that I didn't talk about, so much more to discover in this book, this treasury. It really is a treasury. Oh, the sun finally came out, so I turned off my backlight behind me. So it's so nice to have the sunshine at last. So now I'm done showing you the illustrated versions. I wanted to show you the Sanditon Continuations that I came up. As I told you before, I'm reading through all the Sanditons. It's kind of my project for this year. And as I'm reading and putting them on my website, I showed you guys before Sanditon by Jane Austen and Another Lady, and talked about this book earlier in the year. And I said how I always thought it was so clever that Marie Dobbs is the author, but that she called herself Another Lady. And that's because when Jane Austen published her works originally, she didn't put her name on them. It just read by a lady, not by Jane Austen. And so I just thought it was really funny that Marie Dobbs put her name as And Another Lady. I thought that was very clever. This one includes Jane Austen's original 11.5 chapters. Jane Austen completed 11 chapters and was in the middle of the 12th chapter when she put her pen down and stopped writing. I really enjoyed this one. It moves seamlessly from Jane Austen's writing to a new story. It's exciting, it's romantic, it's well-centered, the characters are wonderful. To be honest, I have loved every single Sanditon that I've read so far. They each have something special about them, but if you're looking for a version that is the most Jane Austen-like in plot, I would say this would be the one to go for. It was a really good read, one that I'd really like to reread again. And then I picked up this version of Sanditon by Kate Riordan. It doesn't have Jane Austen's original chapters in it. It just is completely an adaptation from the very beginning. And it's really beautifully written. I would recommend reading this one first if you have not seen the TV series, because it is very, very much exactly like the TV series. The dialogue, the action, everything is exactly the same, basically. There are some extras, like the architect, Mr. Stringer, has a dog. You know, little things here and there that are put in. And then, of course, you also get to enjoy the beautiful writing. Kate Riordan's writing is rather beautiful. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, it is very much the plot of Sanditon, the TV show. So I would say if you haven't seen it, or if you haven't seen it in a long time and don't really remember what happened, this would be a good one to read. Then the other one I picked up is by Juliet Shapiro, Jane Austen and Juliet Shapiro. It also includes Jane Austen's first 11 and a half chapters, or 11 chapters finished on chapter 12. This one was very interesting too. This one has a bit of a mystery in it, and it has a little bit of that upstairs downstairs thing going on, where there's a bit of an intrigue involving the servants in the grand houses. I wouldn't say that it moves as seamlessly from Jane Austen's writing to Juliet Shapiro's as the Marie Dobbs version does. Marie Dobbs' voice is more similar to Jane Austen's, but it was still very satisfying. And I feel like this one is more about the town of Sanditon and the community, more so than the actual love story between the two presumed love interests, Charlotte Haywood and Sidney Parker. According to the family, Jane Austen's original title for Sanditon was The Brothers, so I think it's kind of interesting that Juliet Shapiro takes that sort of take on the story. I love this cover, by the way. It's by Fragonard. Fragonard is one of my favorite artists. I love his work. And you might be more familiar with his work titled The Swing, which is a beautiful one, a very naughty one. I love that one as well, especially that shoe flying off her foot. It's always been one of my favorite things. But anyway, this one is titled The Souvenir, I believe, and it was painted in 1777, so Jane Austen would have been about 2 years old when this was painted. I really enjoyed my reading, and also this one is probably the fastest paced of all of the Sanditons that I've read so far. This one is a library book. I wanted to just show it to you. It's Charlotte by Julia Barrett, and also contains the first chapters by Jane Austen and then moves into the story. One thing I can say about it is it really kind of feels like the author might be trying a little too hard to be Jane Austen-like at times. Sometimes I feel like the words are like too complicated, or the sentences a little too complicated, like they need not have been that way. But I'm really enjoying it nonetheless. I'm not quite finished yet. I'm about to start chapter 29. But one of the things that I would also like to say about this book is that this one was not listed on the PBS Masterpiece website. But there are so many things in this book that you see in the Sanditon TV series. Even one of my favorite characters that you see in the Sanditon TV show came from here, and even smaller details that seem to be coming from this book, which I thought was very interesting. Another one that I read, I actually listened to on audio, and I liked it so much that I ordered a copy. It hasn't arrived yet, and it's a pity because I believe that one might actually be illustrated. If it does arrive in time, I'll put a cutaway here and show you the illustrations. But it is Sanditon on Reflection by D.B. Thomas. And that one was so wonderful. If you are at all unsatisfied with the way that the TV show went, you'll enjoy this one. It was written after the TV series came out, and it is the basic plot of the TV show, but it has layers that add so much interest to the story. and it was very satisfying. I really, really enjoyed it. And then I have 3 here that I have not read yet. A Season at Sanditon by Roux Servitova. And this one seems to have some of Jane Austen's chapters in it, but not all of them. I think she departs from Jane Austen's writing a little earlier to maybe follow her plot. I am very interested in reading this one because I've heard good things about it. And I really love this artwork. It's a picture of Miranda from Shakespeare's The Tempest. Shakespeare's Miranda in The Tempest is a character who is a bit innocent. She's been raised away from society and away from some of the evils of society, kind of a little bit like Charlotte Haywood, who has been raised, you know, out in the country and away from the towns and all the intrigues and etc. So I thought that was a very good choice. And then I have 2 others that are just Sanditon spin-offs. One is a Sanditon Quadrille by Rebecca Baldwin, a Regency love story. I believe this is just set in Sanditon, and you get some entrances by people you might know from the Sanditon story, but otherwise it's not really connected with Sanditon. So that will be interesting. I might take this one on my travels to read. We're actually leaving to go to Canada tomorrow, and I'm taking my hard drive with me to edit this video while we're visiting and traveling. But anyway, this one might be the one I take with me because it's so small. This one is Ex-Library, The Suspicion at Sanditon, or The Disappearance of Lady Denham, a Mr. and Mrs. Darcy mystery by Carrie Bebris. There's a series of mysteries where Elizabeth and Darcy go around and solve them, and they all kind of have to do with Jane Austen's books, and this one has to do with Sanditon. So I'm kind of interested to read this one. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So yeah, so those are the Sanditons, and there are several others. I thought I would just read to you the ones that I am missing that I don't have, and I'll put pictures of them up on the screen. Set in the Silver Sea by Jane Austen and a Gentleman. That's very clever. A Return to Sanditon by Anne Toledo. The Brothers by Jane Austen and Helen Baker. The Price of Butcher's Meat, and another one called A Cure for All Diseases. Both of those are by Reginald Hill. Those Who Tell, a modern tale based on Jane Austen's Sanditon. That's by Alma Kelleher. And then there's also an earlier version that was written in the 1930s by Alice Cobbett that is quite difficult to get a hold of. The closest library that has it is Yale University. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get a hold of that one, but apparently that is one where the love interest is different. It's not Sydney Parker, apparently, in that one. That's all I know about that one. Dancing with Mr. Darcy by Sarah Waters. Stories inspired by Jane Austen and Chawton House. This is a collection of stories that were put together as a result of a competition that was held in honor of the bicentennial of Jane Austen moving to Chawton House. Jane Austen moving to Chawton House, or Chawton Cottage, was a very important thing because it was there that she began being very productive and putting out her novels. Before that, she was never really in a space where she could write. And it wasn't until she actually found a good home, a good solid home, that she found herself in a space where she could write again. And so it's really a big deal. I started reading this, and the first story is wonderful. I think it's called Jane Austen and the River Styx, and it's about Jane Austen traveling down the River Styx to Hades. It's kind of a mixture of Jane Austen and Greek mythology. And while she's down visiting Hades, she is judged by the characters in her novels, many of whom are rather perturbed at the way that she characterized them. So it was just a wonderful story. I really loved it. So I'm looking forward to reading through the rest of the stories and see which ones resonate with me. Speaking of homes and houses and the effect that they had on Jane Austen, I have been wanting to read Lucy Worsley's Jane Austen at Home for some time now, and I actually found this 250th birthday edition on 8 books. It's gently used, and I had to get it. I love this cover illustration, which is taken from patterns that the V&A Museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum, has collected over history of cloth and textiles, wallpaper, etc. I wanted to show you, my mom and I went to the V&A Museum, and when I was there, I picked up this tote bag. It's one of my favorite tote bags. I use it quite a bit. It's probably looking a bit rough, but But yeah, I was very excited to find that there. They have quite a collection, and so this one is chosen from their collection, and it's quite beautiful. And I love the gilding as well. I think it's quite beautiful. And it has a wonderful new introduction by Lucy Worsley as well. And of course there's Jane's silhouette. So yeah, I plan to read this month. I can't wait to dive into it. Jane Fairfax by Joan Aiken. I've been wanting to read it for some time because I think Jane Fairfax is just such an interesting and intriguing character in Emma, and we don't really learn very much about her. And I love Joan Aiken's writing as well. Everything that I've read from Joan Aiken I've enjoyed, so I've been looking forward to reading this one, and so happy to have found this version. And this portrait is done by a portrait artist by the name of Sir Thomas Lawrence. I couldn't remember his name for a minute, sorry. And he was actually a bit of a child progeny. I read that at age 10 he was supporting the family with portraits that he created, and he went on to become one of the most famous portrait artists of the time, even painting several of the royal family members, especially Queen Charlotte. He did several of Queen Charlotte's. This girl on the cover is a 16-year-old girl, Emily Lamb, and I looked her up, and she had such an interesting life. She actually grew up to become the wife of a British Prime Minister by the name of Palmerston. His real name was Henry John Temple, and Henry John Temple and she were romantically involved for a very long time before they actually got married. They got married in their 50s, and I believe that they had to get Queen Victoria's permission because of their age to get married. And they ended up living into their 80s together, and by all accounts they were very much in love into their old age. So I think there's a really wonderful love story there. One thing of note that I thought was very interesting was that the couple got married finally in their 50s on December 16th, which of course is Jane Austen's birthday. So I just thought that was an interesting coincidence. Well, that is it. I hope you have enjoyed these books and found some inspiration, something that you might enjoy reading for Jane Austen July. Thank you for all my viewers, anyone who supports me. I really, really appreciate it. I will be back soon with another video, so until then, I hope you keep finding the beauty in the small things and enjoying your summer or your winter if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. And I will chat soon. Bye.